Imagine a nation so powerful that its very existence reshapes the global order. The United States, a beacon of prosperity and democracy, stood tall as a superpower for decades. But what if I told you that the seeds of its downfall were sown not in recent years, but much earlier? Picture a moment when its golden age began to wane, subtly altering the course of history. This isn't a story about a sudden collapse, but a gradual erosion of dominance. Buckle up as we dive deep into the pivotal moments and underlying factors that signaled the start of America's decline. In the late 20th century, the United States was at the peak of its influence, holding unrivaled economic and military power. However, beneath this facade of invincibility, cracks were beginning to appear. It was the early 1970s, a time of significant change, when shifts in global politics and domestic policies began to alter America's trajectory. The Vietnam War, economic instability, and rising social unrest marked the beginning of a transformation. This story isn't just about dates and events, but about understanding how a series of interconnected decisions and unforeseen consequences set the stage for a changing world order. The Vietnam War and its fallout. The Vietnam War, often referred to as the American War in Vietnam, was a complex and controversial conflict that left an indelible mark on the United States. Spanning from the late 1950s to 1975, the war was not only a military struggle, but also a significant turning point in American history. The repercussions of this protracted conflict were far-reaching, affecting American society, politics, and its position on the global stage. Military and strategic failures. Initially, the Vietnam War was framed as a critical battle against the spread of communism during the Cold War. The United States, driven by the domino theory, believed that the fall of South Vietnam to communism would trigger a chain reaction, leading to the spread of communism throughout Southeast Asia. To combat this perceived threat, the U.S. invested substantial military and economic resources into the conflict. Despite the extensive involvement, the war's outcome was far from the anticipated success. The North Vietnamese, with their deep-rooted nationalist and ideological motivations, proved to be resilient adversaries. The American military, despite its superior technology and firepower, struggled to adapt to the unconventional warfare tactics employed by the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces. The war saw significant casualties on both sides, with the U.S. suffering over 58,000 military deaths and countless wounded. Public distrust and anti-war sentiment. One of the most profound impacts of the Vietnam War was its effect on public opinion. Initially, many Americans supported the war effort, driven by anti-communist sentiments and a belief in the righteousness of their cause. However, as the conflict dragged on and the casualty numbers mounted, public opinion began to shift. The Tet Offensive of 1968 was a pivotal moment. This surprise attack by North Vietnamese forces during the Tet Lunar New Year challenged the U.S. government's optimistic reports about the war's progress. The brutal reality of the conflict, coupled with graphic media coverage, eroded public trust in government statements and decisions. The war's portrayal in the media, including images of the My Lai massacre and the Kent State shootings, further fueled anti-war sentiment. Protests against the war became widespread, with college students, civil rights activists, and other groups leading demonstrations. The anti-war movement was not just a reaction to the war itself, but also a manifestation of broader social discontent. Social and political consequences. The fallout from the Vietnam War extended beyond the battlefield and into American society. The war left a deep scar on the American psyche, contributing to a sense of disillusionment and cynicism. The credibility gap between the government and the public widened, leading to a more skeptical and questioning society. Politically, the war had significant ramifications. The war's unpopularity contributed to the resignation of President Lyndon B. Johnson and a shift in U.S. foreign policy. The War Powers Act of 1973, which sought to limit the president's ability to engage in military conflicts without congressional approval, was a direct response to the perceived overreach of executive power during the Vietnam War. Domestically, the war's impact was felt in various ways. The draft, which forced many young men into military service, became a symbol of unfairness and inequality, particularly as it disproportionately affected working-class and minority communities. The post-war era also saw a rise in social issues, including drug addiction and a growing sense of societal fragmentation. Economic and veteran struggles. The economic impact of the Vietnam War was considerable. The war's financial burden contributed to rising inflation and economic instability in the 1970s. The cost of the war, coupled with oil crises of the decade, strained the American economy and contributed to a period of stagflation. Veterans returning from Vietnam faced numerous challenges. Many struggled with physical injuries, mental health issues, and difficulties reintegrating into civilian life. The lack of support and recognition for their service led to a generation of veterans who felt abandoned by their country. The psychological effects of the war, including post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, became a significant issue, leading to increased advocacy and awareness in later years. Legacy and reflection. The Vietnam War's legacy is complex and multifaceted. It led to a reassessment of U.S. foreign policy, military strategy, and the role of government. The war's lessons influenced subsequent U.S. interventions and shaped public attitudes toward military engagements. The war also prompted a broad reflection on American values and identity. The anti-war movement and the experiences of veterans contributed to a greater emphasis on civil liberties, human rights, and the need for transparency in government. The Vietnam War remains a powerful reminder of the cost of conflict and the importance of critically evaluating national policies and actions. Economic stagnation and the oil crisis. The 1970s were a turbulent decade for the American economy, marked by significant economic stagnation and two major oil crises that had profound effects on the nation's financial stability. The oil crises of 1973 and 1979 exposed vulnerabilities in the U.S. economy and triggered a period of profound economic challenge known as stagflation. The first crisis began in 1973 when the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, imposed an oil embargo in response to U.S. support for Israel during the Yom Kippur War. This embargo led to a dramatic spike in oil prices and a severe shortage of fuel. The sudden increase in energy costs caused widespread economic disruption, leading to higher prices for goods and services and contributing to inflation. This period of inflation was coupled with stagnating economic growth and rising unemployment, a situation that economists termed stagflation. Unlike traditional inflation, which is typically accompanied by strong economic growth, stagflation presented a paradox where inflation and unemployment rose simultaneously, challenging existing economic theories and policies. The second oil crisis occurred in 1979, triggered by the Iranian Revolution, which led to a disruption in oil supplies. This crisis further exacerbated the already strained economic conditions, leading to even higher oil prices and more severe inflationary pressures. The U.S. economy struggled with increased production costs, reduced consumer purchasing power, and a growing trade deficit. They also led to a reassessment of economic policies and energy strategies, influencing the shift towards deregulation and energy conservation measures in subsequent decades. The decline of American manufacturing. The post-World War II era saw the United States emerge as the world's manufacturing powerhouse. However, by the late 20th century, this dominance began to wane. The rise of globalization and the movement of manufacturing jobs overseas marked a significant shift. American companies sought lower production costs abroad, leading to the loss of millions of manufacturing jobs. The decline of American manufacturing had far-reaching consequences. It not only led to economic decline in many industrial cities, but also contributed to growing income inequality. As manufacturing jobs disappeared, many American workers faced job insecurity and stagnant wages, which, in turn, fueled social unrest and a sense of economic disenfranchisement. The rise of political polarization. The late 20th and early 21st centuries witnessed a significant increase in political polarization within the United States, transforming the national discourse and affecting governance. Several factors contributed to this growing divide, reshaping how Americans view and engage with politics. One major driver was the increasing fragmentation of media. With the rise of cable news and later digital media, news consumption became more segmented. Individuals could choose media outlets that reinforced their pre-existing beliefs, creating echo chambers where dissenting viewpoints were rarely encountered. This phenomenon intensified partisan divisions, as people were increasingly exposed only to viewpoints that aligned with their political leanings. Political polarization was further exacerbated by partisan gerrymandering. This practice involved drawing congressional district boundaries in a way that maximized electoral advantages for one party. As a result, many districts became overwhelmingly partisan, leading to more extreme candidates being elected and reducing the incentive for lawmakers to seek bipartisan solutions. This gridlock in Congress and state legislatures often resulted in a lack of effective governance and further alienation of moderate voters. Social and cultural issues also played a significant role in deepening the political divide. Debates over issues such as immigration, healthcare, and climate change became highly polarized, with each side adopting increasingly rigid stances. The politicization of these issues often overshadowed the search for common ground, making compromise more challenging. Finally, the rise of political and social movements that emphasized identity politics and ideological purity contributed to the polarization. The end of the Cold War and its implications. The end of the Cold War in 1991 marked the conclusion of a major chapter in global politics. While the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the end of communist threats might have seemed like victories for the U.S., it also led to unintended consequences. The absence of a clear geopolitical adversary shifted the focus to internal issues and contributed to a sense of complacency. The 1990s saw a brief period of economic prosperity and technological advancement, but this was accompanied by growing income inequality and mounting national debt. The optimism of the post-Cold War era masked underlying structural problems, such as trade imbalances and an over-reliance on financial markets. These issues would later come to a head in the 21st century, contributing to a broader decline. The financial crisis of 2008. The financial crisis of 2008 was a watershed moment in American history. Triggered by the collapse of the housing market and the subsequent global financial meltdown, the crisis exposed significant weaknesses in the American financial system. The subprime mortgage crisis, coupled with risky financial practices and inadequate regulation, led to widespread economic turmoil. The aftermath of the crisis saw massive bailouts for banks and financial institutions, but it also resulted in severe economic hardship for many Americans. The recession that followed led to high unemployment rates, a decline in home values, and a rise in foreclosures. The crisis underscored the vulnerabilities in the American economy and highlighted issues such as income inequality and systemic risk. The decline of American dominance is not attributable to a single event or factor, but rather a complex interplay of historical, economic, and social developments. From the aftermath of the Vietnam War to the financial crisis of 2008, each period marked a significant shift in the nation's trajectory. Economic challenges, political polarization, and the rise of new technologies have all played a role in reshaping the American landscape. While the United States continues to be a global power, the decline of its unchallenged dominance reflects broader changes in the world order. Understanding these historical moments provides insights into the evolving nature of power and influence. As we reflect on these pivotal events, it's crucial to consider how they have shaped not only America's past, but also its future. The story of America's decline is one of adaptation and resilience. It serves as a reminder that even the most powerful nations face periods of vulnerability and transformation. As we navigate the complexities of the modern world, the lessons from these historical shifts can guide us in understanding and addressing the challenges of today. Personal thoughts. Reflecting on America's journey from unparalleled dominance to its current state reveals both the strengths and vulnerabilities of a great nation. The rise and fall of empires are not just about dates and events, but about the human experiences and decisions that shape them. Each of these pivotal moments offers valuable lessons on the importance of adaptability, resilience, and foresight. In a world of rapid change, it's essential to recognize that the path to greatness is not always linear. Understanding the factors that contributed to America's decline can help us appreciate the complexities of global power dynamics and the need for thoughtful leadership. As we move forward, we should draw on the lessons of the past to build a more inclusive and resilient future.